this is a very hard time for a teenager. It's more confusing than it's ever been. And that confusion lives in the pockets of many of our teenagers on mobile phones. Well, we are living in a very, very confused and difficult period when it comes to the subject of gender. Parents don't ever think that somehow you can isolate your children enough that those powerful influences won't be in your home. If your children attend a public school, they're going to be indoctrinated in a way of thinking about gender that is radically different than what the Bible has to say about this important topic. When God created male and female, he stood back from that creation and said, "It is very good." It's just impossible from a biblical worldview to think that I am in a body that is a massive mistake for me. And it's very sad that that view has become so normalized in our culture. It made me think, makes me think of the great Christian philosopher, theologian Francis Schaeffer, who wrote in the 70s, who made the statement that human rationality, apart from God's revelation, will always end in irrationality. Think about that. Human reason, apart from the rescue of divine revelation, will always end in irrational conclusions. So it's not surprising that a culture that has walked away from the revelation of God would end in this form of irrationality. Now, there are two possibilities of what could be happening in the life of a teenager that is struggling with gender issues. It could be that there's actually a emotional, psychological body dysmorphia. We should not discount that. Let me give you an example. We know in other areas that it's possible for a human being to come to the point where they hate their body and where they think their body looks a way that it doesn't actually look. Think of anorexia. That's the anorexic. They look at a body and they do not see what you and I would see. And they do dangerous things to deal with that. There's an inaccuracy of that. We know, because the Bible predicts it to us, that sin will cause us to look at our world in distorted ways, have sort of a blindness to what is actually real. So you may be dealing with a child that is actually dealing with that dynamic. And I would say that there are two things you need to do. First of all, parents, you need to become expert in gender confusion. And there are wonderful books by faithful Christian writers on this topic. Do your research. Find good, solid, biblical thinkers who are writing on the issues of gender. Get to understand this. There's some very fine secular books that are out there that warn about this issue. I think of one called Irreversible Damage that is just very, very helpful. So become an expert. But I think if it's true dysmorphia going on, your child needs help. It's almost too overwhelming to have this as a constant conversation in your family. That's why the Bible gives us the larger body of Christ. Get help for your child. Your child probably needs to sit with a good, solid biblical counselor who understands the issue and become a friend with that child and begin to get at the deeper issues of heart that's in the life of this child. There may be dynamics in your relationship that have pushed the child in this direction. You need to be open to looking at all of those things. That's the first category. The second category is that your child is being powerfully influenced by social media, particularly if it's a teenage girl. Transgenderism is a fad right now. It couldn't be possible that the masses of girls who are saying they're trans are actually dealing with the deeper dysmorphia. There are all kinds of YouTube and social media sites that are targeted at teenage girls that are pro-fluidity or transgender. Now, here's what complicates that issue. That the psychotherapy culture and the pediatrician and the school counselor probably are not going to fight that social media culture. They probably are going to say, if this is what the child thinks, then that's true, and we're going to help this child. There are states where a child can talk to school counselor and can get counseling. Some places even move toward hormone therapy without the permission of parents. Parents, you need to understand what's happening. You need to get a hold of those influences. You need to take control where you may have lost control. Know this. If a child has bought into this fad and this young teen takes puberty blockers or hormone therapy, that will alter their life forever. Some of that is irreversible. You can go to websites and you can buy breast binders that crush the chest, that are anatomically dangerous for your child in growth and development. This is a big deal. And yet, you need to handle this with patience and understanding and grace. This is a very hard time for a teenager. It's more confusing than it's ever been. And that confusion lives in the pockets of many of our teenagers on mobile phones or on their iPad. And these are people who are fun and cool and great communicators and powerfully influential. And they may actually have greater influence on your teenager than you are having. And so you need to be in this game. You need to understand. You need to become a bit of an expert. And you need to be active. And you need to know what influences are shaping the way my son or my daughter thinks about who or she is. You see, if it is an emotional, spiritual, psychological lostness that is not solved by altering my body. And there are reports of many people on the other side who are now adults who weep at what they did to themselves and know that the lostness is still there. It wasn't solved by the choices that they made. This is not a generation where you can get away with passive parenting. You need to be in the game. You need to be in it intelligently. You need to be in it with patient grace. Our children need our help because we live in a world gone crazy. We've separated ourselves from the revelation of God, and we're now dealing with the irrationality that results from that.